Hello my lovers, well I thought I'd just do this video. Now you'll hear this term two-tiered policing, which I've used, but actually it's multi-tiered. It's not just two-tiered, because I've worked for the police and they do approach different communities, different sectors in a different way. And you can see that the way they'll approach LGBTQI communities, the way they'll approach black communities, Chinese communities, Somali communities, Muslim communities, Sikh communities. Their approach is different each time. Now it can be simple as adapting to the needs of those communities without causing offence. So they approach it in a certain manner. And that's fair enough, because communication is everything. But it can also lead to what I've seen, where they'll ignore a criminal action by one part of community, where with another sector of the community they'll take action, because they don't want to upset or cause any rumpus within the communities that they're eager to keep in with and placate and look like the friends. Now why would they be doing that? Well, I'm talking about Merseyside Police's history and how they got on in the past in regard to minority groups. Because we had the infamous Liverpool 8 Toxteth riots against police racism. Now they were at times when, and I can remember those days, the police were openly bigoted on Merseyside. They didn't even try to hide it. It was in your face. And it's interesting to note that a lot of the senior officers who are at the top of the force now and went to work for other forces as well, started their careers when it was well known that not only Merseyside Police, other police forces didn't even hide the fact that they were bigoted. So work that out when they're going on. We love our LGBTQI communities. We love our black, Asian, Chinese communities. Why they wanted to join a organisation like that in the first place. But they want you to forget all that now. And the simple truth is, the reason they joined police forces back then, who were openly biased and bigoted, was because they shared the same mindset. It's just that the Home Office stepped in and made demands that they didn't make it known that they had these bigoted beliefs, mindsets going on. And it's the Home Office that started wokeifying the police. Now, also, this multi-tiered approach to policing, isn't it new? It's been going on for decades. Look, you can go back to the Thatcher period and the miners' strikes, and you can see the police used to send in agents provocateurs to stir up trouble within these demonstrations, these protests by the miners, to make them get violent. And we know that was proven at the time that was happening, because they were being dictated to by the Thatcher government at that time, and Thatcher was desperate, with good reason, I can remember those days, to get control of the unions, because the unions were bringing the country to a standstill. I can remember it clearly. You were having to wait months for bins to be emptied. You couldn't even bury your dead. That's how serious it was. There were strikes, power strikes, people having to live in the dark or by candlelight I should say, because the power strikes, it was terrible. People have no idea. It really was bad back then. Something needed doing to the unions, because they were literally holding the whole country to ransom, and they didn't care who suffered in the process. And remember who were the unions associated with? the Labour Party. Just bear that in mind. Just bear that in mind when they didn't care how much the country suffered as long as what they were getting. But the fact is that Thatcher was clearly using the police forces to get what she wanted, and they were acting in accordance to what she or the Home Office was dictating them to do. So this multi-tiered approach to police is nothing new at all. Nothing new at all. Anyway, as we are in the present situation where people are feeling frustrated, they're getting told, on the one hand, this is the buzzword, isn't it? We police without fear or favour. No, you do police with favour. You favour one political side to another political side, one community to another community, one religious belief system to another religious belief system. And we know that you can see it now. It's really in your face. They're not even hiding it, even though they're denying it continually. And of course, the newest thing that is very, very worrying is the stopping political parties, opposition political parties, having public debates or public demonstrations with the warning, this could lead to a riot, so you can't do that. Well, I'm sorry, you can't blame someone who wants to give a counter political view of causing a riot. Blame the people who are rioting. That's who you blame. You don't blame an innocent party for it. But that's the new technique. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to stop any opposition speaking out. And I think you can see this with what's happened with reform. Why didn't the police find that these people getting out aside Reform UK's officers, or allegedly Reform UK's officers, why didn't they see that as potentially causing a riot? You see what I mean about they do favour, very much favour, and this will all be coming from the Home Office. And Mark Rowley, who needs to grow up here, is just rolling over on his back and saying, yes, I'll do anything you want me to do. I'll do and say anything you want me to do. And that's what he's doing. That's exactly what he is doing. They've got no true leadership at the top of the police. But as I said, this has been going on for decades. It's just now it's more in your face and getting more concerning because they're more very much proactive with it. Now, why this is important as well is the whole ethos of when the police were created, the modern police, the Met Police, through the Policing Bill of 1829. Now, Parliament did not were very opposed to a civilian police force because they didn't want it to be seen as a parliamentary police force. And there was a good reason they didn't. They were terrified that Britain was on the brink of a revolution. There were revolutions kicking off in America. Only a few decades before was the French Revolution. There were revolutions kicking off all over the place. And it looked like it was going to get very close to happening in Britain. That was going to take place. Now, all that they had a hand then, I mean, they had police forces back then before the Met, but not in the modern sense of we'd see a police force now. So they could only rely on the army to quell demonstrations, and a few of them turned very bloody. And the public were getting annoyed by the army being sent in and acting in this way. And the fact is, once you set an army against its own people, that's an act of civil war. And back in those days, in Britain, you could own arms, firearms, swords, whatever you wanted. So Parliament was absolutely terrified that people could defend themselves and start attacking back at the armies and cause a revolution to take place. So this idea of creating a completely new force, a civilian force, would quell that idea. And back then, when the Met Police were created, they didn't even have handcuffs. That's how they were insisting they could. If they'd seen officers like we have now, ARVs going around with firearms, they would never have passed the bill. That would have looked too much like an army to them. So over time, its police force in Britain have progressed to being similar to a military force. And that was never the intention. And if you want proof of that, you'll hear the term civilian police. So when you hear the public, when they talk about employees of police forces and they say civvies and police officers, it's nonsense. Every single employee of a police force, even the highest ranking officer in the British Police, the Commissioner of the Met, is a civilian. Civilian police refers to the police officer, not who they are policing. And it's to distinguish them from the military police. And if you want proof of that, all you have to do is ask yourself, if a member of the armed forces is arrested for a crime, they go to a military course and are sent to a military prison when convicted. When a police officer is convicted of a crime, it's in the same court everyone else goes to, and they'll go to a prison that everyone else goes to. So they're civilians. And that was stressed, that was vitally important to Parliament before they passed the bill, that these were not an army. But now they've sort of morphed into what could be seen as an army, the way they carry on now and again. So the important term there is not a parliamentary force. That was the buzzword back then. This is not a parliamentary police force. But I'm sorry, I saw it when I worked for the police. And as I say, a quote of the Thatcher time, they have become a parliamentary force. And that's because the Home Secretary dictates them. Successive Home Secretaries tell them what to do. The reason Mark Rowley came out that meeting, Cobra meeting, and angrily grabbed that mic is because, I can tell you now, he'd have been getting dictated to, you do this, you do that, or you'll be in trouble. And all he's thinking about is his own little nest that he's got feathered. All the chief officers do. So he'll be going out there fuming, but doing what he's told to do. And you'll hear them say again, they come out with the little mantras, the buzzwords. We police without fear or favour. We police without fear. Listen to it. That's all you're going to hear. Without fear or favour. No, they police in accordance with what Parliament and the government of the day is telling them to. They don't get this, they don't get the money. There'll be threats, well, we're going to cut funding here, we're going to cut funding there. And how they do it, they start threatening to cut funding in the higher ranks. And the senior officers don't like that. They don't like the idea that their little nests are going to be defeathered. That's what they don't like. So when I say this, Sir Robert Peel will be spinning in his grave at a site like this, it wouldn't have just been him, it would have been Parliament itself back in those days. They would have found it abhorrent. Armed police officers? What? They couldn't even have handcuffs back then. And just to point out how horrified they would have been, there were a few police officers, or peelers as they were nicknamed then, who were murdered by members of the public when they tried to apprehend them. And it was actually considered by the court justifiable homicide. And they got off with it. That's how serious they were back then, that they didn't want officers going around just using the, laws to brutalise people. The idea of police officers stopping you and searching you would have been considered horrific. The idea of police officers going into your property, being able to enter your house and search you. Ooh, no way, because a house then was considered an Englishman's castle. I'm saying Englishman's castle because that's the term. We know that Britain, the whole of Britain is involved, but that's the term. But yet they would never have stood for it, and certainly not armed police officers. They would never have tolerated that. But that's the situation we're in now. Now, the next video I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to discuss how best to deal with the police. Rioting is no good. I can tell you now, that never gets what you want. Rioting plays right into the hands of the establishment. It certainly does play into the hands of the establishment. There's a much simpler way, and I'll use my hometown, an incident that happened in my hometown, Liverpool, in the 80s at a gay club, which changed the police's approach to the gay community overnight, because they said something, said, didn't do, said, just used the power of their mouths to say something that put the fear of God into every detective and senior officer in the Merseyside Police. So I'll discuss that tomorrow. Bye bye for now.